Good evening. Thank you for joining us for this Public Information Center for the Township of Essa Fifth Line Bridge Improvements Municipal Class Environmental Assessment. We'll start with some introductions. So my name is Tammy Kalamutu and I'm with the AME Group. We're the consulting engineering firm completing the Class EA on behalf of the Township. I have some colleagues with me tonight, including Brian Wickenheiser, who is our Bridges and Structures Group Lead, as well as James Baldwin, one of our structural engineers who's been providing the technical input into this study. We also have Michael McHale, Manager of Public Works and Deputy CAO with the Township, and I understand that other members of Township staff as well as Council are in attendance as well. So I would like to thank you all for joining us. We do have a few things that we would like to highlight with regards to tonight's presentation. The first is that this presentation is being recorded. The presentation material, including a copy of this recording with closed captioning as well as a transcript, will be made available after this event on the Township's website. Please do allow for about 24 to 48 hours for the material to appear. If you have any difficulties accessing it, you can always email us and we can try to send it to you directly. There also may be a 20 to 30 second video delay throughout the presentation. That may be as a result of Wi-Fi connections or technology, so we please just ask that you be patient. During the live event, the presenters, including myself, will not be able to see or hear you as microphones and cameras have been deactivated. However, we do certainly welcome your comments and input. You can share this with us through the live event questions and answers option. So to do this, you will look for the chat bubble with the question mark icon located in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Once you click on that, a screen will pop up and there will be an option at the bottom to ask a question. If you click on that, it will bring up another screen where you can first enter your name and then your question, and you can hit the submit button, the button that looks like a little paper airplane. That will submit your questions to the project team, and the project team will be in the background gathering, collecting all of the questions, reviewing them throughout the presentation, and then we'll make time at the end to respond to everyone's questions and comments. If you're not able to stay for the full duration of the presentation, or if you'd rather submit your comments or questions at a later date, you can certainly do so. You can send them directly to members of the project team. I do believe their contact information has been provided in the notice, and it will be provided again at the end of this presentation. The agenda for tonight's presentation will start with a brief discussion of the study area and the project background. We'll provide a brief overview of the municipal Class EA process and where we're at in that process. We'll provide a recap of the preferred solution that was previously selected during phase 2 of this process. We'll get into a discussion of the alternative design concepts that were considered and an evaluation of those design concepts. We'll then give you a little bit of information on the next steps in the process, and we'll conclude with a question and comment period. So bridge number 9 is located on the 5th line, which is a 2-lane collector road. The bridge spans the Nottawasaga River between the 20th and 25th side roads. The bridge itself is located where there's a large meander of the river, and it's within a fairly deep river valley. Because of this, a large portion of the surrounding lands are considered to be an area of natural or scientific interest. And the woodlands and valley lands also support potential habitat for a variety of wildlife, as well as fish and aquatic species. The existing structure is approximately 70 years old, and it consists of 2 spans of concrete T-beams that are supported on concrete abutments and a central pier. It also has a concrete deck and a concrete wearing surface. The traveled portion, or the width of the traveled portion of the road that is across the structure, is only 6.1 meters wide. So that means that it's not quite wide enough to support 2 full lanes of traffic. So it acts as a single lane structure at this point in time. The sight lines on either approach are substandard, which means that it can be sometimes difficult to see around the curves as you approach the structure. There have been issues with ongoing erosion within the river valley and deposition of sediment near that central pier within the existing riverbed. This has created an island or a restriction within the watercourse, which has also resulted in a number of ice jams and log jams in recent years, as shown in the picture on this slide. Recent inspections of the bridge have also identified the need for maintenance of the structure, as well as eventual replacement of the structure within about a 6 to 10 year timeframe. As a result, the township has initiated a municipal Class EA, or Class Environmental Assessment, to examine options to address these deficiencies. And that includes accommodating a full 2 lanes of vehicular traffic, improving the horizontal and vertical alignment to meet minimum geometric design standards, as well as to address these ongoing issues related to erosion, sediment deposition, as well as these ice and debris jams that are occurring in the river. In accordance with the Environmental Assessment Act, a municipality is required to conduct a municipal class environmental assessment before certain types of infrastructure projects, such as this one, can proceed to design and construction. The purpose of this is to ensure that projects consider the environment, and it's important to note that the environment is more broadly defined than one might think. So the environment, the word environment, includes the natural environment, which is what we would typically consider to be plants, animals, groundwater, surface water. But it also includes the social and cultural environment, the physical or built environment, as well as the economic environment. All of these environments influence the people in the communities within the municipality, so all of these environments must be considered. The Class EA process requires the evaluation of various potential solutions and design concepts, so that once one is selected and implemented, not only will the identified problems be addressed, but the purpose is that the impacts to the various environments can also be minimized or mitigated. This figure just provides a general overview of the Class EA process. It might be a little bit difficult to see on your screen, but the intention is to just point out that this project is following a Schedule C class environmental assessment process. And that means we have to complete phases 1 through 4 of this process. You may have recalled when we did PIC number 1, we were back in phase 2. We are now currently in phase 3 at the consultation phase. So we are engaging and consulting again with various agencies, First Nations, stakeholders, as well as the public to obtain feedback on the work that has been completed to date. So as I mentioned, there was a PIC number 1 previously held during phase 2 of the process, and that was back in late 2021. At that time, we had considered several alternative solutions to address the problem, and those were sort of more broad solutions and included option 1, which was do nothing. And that option really only gets considered because it provides a baseline upon which to assess the other alternative solutions. But because it doesn't really address the problem statement that has been developed or the reason why the Class EA was initiated, it's not typically considered to be a viable solution. At that point in time, we also considered the alternative of rehabilitating the existing bridge structure, replacing it in its current location to accommodate the 2 lanes of traffic, and replacing the bridge but on a new alignment further to the west. And after the evaluation was completed in phase 2, we held the PIC and had consultation with various stakeholders. Option 3, the option of replacing the bridge structure in its current location, was selected as the preferred solution. So since then, the team has undertaken additional studies and we've completed additional design work to develop these alternative design concepts for how this preferred solution could be implemented. So in doing so, the first thing we had to look at was the horizontal alignment. And in order to keep the structure generally within the same location as it currently is, there was really only one option for a vertical alignment. So all of the concepts that you're going to see moving forward will have that one consistent horizontal alignment. We then looked at options for the vertical alignment, which is the profile or the grade of the road. We came up with 3 options, with the first being what we call the lowest vertical alignment. And to clarify, this means that this would be the lowest grade raise we would have to meet to improve the profile of the road. And although we say it's the lowest option, it would still result in an increase of the existing road grade by about 2.2 meters. The second option we considered, we called the highest vertical alignment option. So conversely, we looked at an option that would raise the elevation of the road fairly significantly to try to smooth out or reduce the valley that you have to traverse through this area. Under this option, it would require a grade raise of about 4.7 meters. And then the last option, or option 3 that we looked at, was essentially the average between the two. So we called it a mid-height vertical alignment option, and resulting in a raise of the road elevation by about 3.4 meters. So I realize this might be hard to see on your screen, and I will try to zoom in as I speak to show you or point out what I'm trying to highlight. We do suggest that it may be best that if you want to review this in more detail, you wait until the information is posted online so that you can, review it and zoom in at your leisure. But essentially what I want to depict for you is that the original road alignment, if you can kind of see it here, had quite an S-bend, and that was contributing to some of the sightline issues out there. The horizontal alignment that we selected, as I mentioned earlier, essentially smooths that alignment out and squares up the bridge to be more in line with the approaches on either side. Down here, you can see the 3 vertical alignment options. So again, I apologize, it may be hard to see, but we have the sort of existing elevation of the road down here, and then blue represents the lowest vertical alignment for option 1. Red would represent the highest vertical option, alignment option, or option 2, with green being the option in the middle. So once we established the vertical alignment options, as we previously mentioned, the team has to go through an evaluation process to evaluate the options based on their potential impact to the various alignments, the various environments. And in this case, we decided to use an evaluation matrix with colors and labels to represent how each criteria was being scored. So a green coloring means that the option scores well or is more preferred for that specific criteria that we're evaluating. And a red coloring means that the option scores more negatively. If an option is scored white or left blank, it essentially means that the score is neutral. For the 3 vertical alignment options, we started with an evaluation of the physical or built alignment. So keeping in mind when we're going through these evaluation matrices, option 1 is again that lowest alignment option, option 2 is the highest, and option 3 is the middle. So for the physical or built alignment, all 3 options generally satisfy or meet the technical design criteria, so they all score well in that category. Similarly, all 3 options we've noted will have impacts to existing utilities, so they all scored somewhat negatively. However, when it comes to design and constructability, options 1 and 3 score better than option 2. And that's mainly due to the fact that option 2 has the largest raise in the road elevation. So it's going to require the largest amount of imported fill, the largest limits of disturbance, and it also may present some additional potential geotechnical challenges due to the height. Moving into the natural environment, from that perspective, All options will require tree removal to the north and the south of the bridge. And this will impact the woodlands and valley lands, as well as the potential habitat for wildlife in that area. So minimizing the amount of tree cutting is certainly preferred, which is why options 1 and 3 score slightly better than option 2, because they will have a less limit of disturbance. When it comes to fish or aquatic habitat, we know that all options will require some in-water work to remove the sediment that has built up in the river, but the evaluation when it comes to the vertical alignment in terms of the aquatic species and habitat doesn't really come into play. Similarly, for surface water and groundwater and climate change considerations, all of these vertical alignment options generally score about the same. For the cultural and social environment, the main differences are that with option 1, as it requires the least amount of property, it is more preferred. Option 2 requires the most amount of property, so it's least preferred, with option 3 being in the middle. Option 1 is also preferred from a construction timing perspective. Because it requires the lowest raise in the road elevation, it is anticipated to take slightly less time to construct. And in terms of the cost between the three, when we get down into the economic environment, option 1 is also anticipated to be the least expensive, again with option 2 being the highest and option 3 being in the middle. So based on the evaluation that we completed, again, for these 3 vertical alignment options, the team has selected option 1, which is the option with the lowest vertical alignment as the preferred design option. And the reason for this is that it does still meet all of the technical design criteria and standards. It has the smallest limit of disturbance and the lowest road construction cost. So that is the option we moved forward with for the vertical alignment only. We then, now that we've had the horizontal alignment and vertical alignment evaluated and considered, we then moved into alternative design concepts for the structure configuration itself. So these 3 options that were developed included a single span structure, a 2-span structure, and a 3-span structure. As illustrated here, the single span structure would have the abutments located outside of the normal channel width. So essentially the channel or the water course would be conveyed through the main opening versus the 2-span structure option, which is essentially putting back the same configuration as what is there now. So there would be a central pier in the riverbed, and the water would basically be split between the 2 openings, and the abutments would be set further back on the slope. And then we have option 3, which would be a 3-span, or sorry, option C, which would be a 3-span option. It would have 2 piers. However, these piers would be set outside of the normal water level. So this means that the main river channel and flow would be directed through one single middle span, and the outside spans would only be used to convey flows during larger rainfall events or spring thaws. The abutments are once again set much further back on the slope. So once again, with these design options, the team had to go through the same evaluation process to score each option, evaluate the various criteria and the potential impacts on the environments. This time, however, to make it a little bit easier, if there were any criteria that were not applicable or were considered neutral, they were not included in the matrix. So when considering the evaluation of the physical environment, you can see that option A, which again, remember, is the single span option, scored the lowest from that perspective because it has to span the river valley in one length. So that essentially means that it will require the largest girders, the most piles, and the largest equipment for installation. From the natural environment evaluation perspective, option B, which is the option with the central pier or similar to what is there now, we have concerns that it may continue to cause the same issues with sediment deposition in the river, potential for ice and debris jams in the river. So it scored a little bit lower, whereas with options A and C, as the abutments and piers are located outside of the bankful width of the river, It should minimize those impacts and provide for better river and bank stability. Option C also scored slightly higher than option A because it does provide that larger flow area for the flooding season and would better accommodate those unusual intense events that are seemingly becoming more familiar or more common with climate change. For the cultural and social environment, we did note that temporary construction noise is anticipated for all options, but option A scored slightly lower as it will have more piles, and piles can certainly be a significant source of noise during construction. From a navigation perspective, both options A and C would be preferred because the watercourse would be conveyed through one main opening and there would not be a pier located in the middle. And then finally, with regards to the economic environment, options B and C are considered to have fairly similar capital construction costs, with option A being the most expensive option. Whereas from an ongoing maintenance and operations view, option B would be least preferred, again, due to the central pier and the potential for those continued issues that would require township forces to go out and address them. So based on the evaluation we completed, the team selected option C, which is the 3-span configuration, as the preferred design concept option, predominantly because it eliminates the central pier and provides for a more open waterway. It provides the more flow area for flooding, and it has a lower capital construction cost compared to option A. So if we pull all of that information together that we've just went through over the past few minutes, the team has selected what we've called design concept option 1C as the preferred design. So this includes the combination of that revised horizontal alignment to smooth out that S-bend, the lowest vertical alignment, and a 3-span bridge structure. And again, it's important to note, or we do want to note, that this is the preliminary preferred design option that the team has selected. However, as we engage with yourselves, review agencies, stakeholders, First Nations, we will be considering all input and comments, and then we'll reevaluate based on the feedback we received to determine if this is the final selection. So please remember that your input is important, and we look forward to receiving your comments on this. In selecting the preferred design, we also need to consider and document as part of the Class EA process any commitments to future work that are required to ensure that any potential impacts are mitigated as the project moves forward. So we've included a couple of tables in this presentation to demonstrate that we have listed items, for example, as the design and construction proceeds, that engagement will still be necessary. There will need to be continued coordination with regards to property acquisition, utility relocations, emergency services when it comes time for, traffic management and that type of thing. There will also be need for obtaining permits and approvals as we move forward through the process. The design will have to be refined to try to minimize impacts as much as possible. So that is reflected in this table. And then under the natural environment, we've also noted that various construction timing restrictions will apply. Things like restoration plans will need to be prepared. Additional investigations may be necessary. For example, during the environmental field work that was completed, there was a single butternut tree that was discovered, and further assessment will be required to determine its health and if any mitigation is going to be required. So there are additional works that will need to be completed, and this will sort of act as a checklist to guide the process moving forward. Similarly, we've noted additional requirements for work such as archaeological assessments, noise and vibration monitoring, the importance of minimizing the economic impact of the project, because we understand that certainly the economics has an impact on the township and its tax base. So again, moving forward, this will act as a checklist for commitments to future work, and you're welcome to view this in more detail once the materials become available, and it will also be in the final Class EA report as well. We're nearing the end of the formal presentation part of this evening's event. I just want to note a couple of next steps before we get into the comment period. So as previously mentioned, a recording of this presentation will be made available on the Township's website. We would appreciate receiving any comments or input you might have before the end of the year. Then what will happen is the team will consider all of these comments, any feedback that has been provided to determine if the preferred design choice will remain the same, or if we need to go back and relook at anything and have some consideration for something that may not have been considered or apparent in the previous evaluation. Once that's completed and the final preferred design choice has been selected, then we will issue a notice of completion, and that will be followed by a final 30-day comment period. So this won't be the last time you'll be able to provide input either. You will have an opportunity during that last 30-day public review period. At the conclusion of that comment period, however, assuming there's no objections, then the Class EA will be considered complete, and that will allow the township to then determine if, how, and when they want to proceed. So again, I do want to point out that a completed Class EA doesn't necessarily mean that design and construction will proceed immediately or in the future. There are obviously other factors that will need to be considered, including budgeting and approvals. So the township would be best to advise moving forward of any intentions to proceed with the implementation phase, but at the end of the 30-day public review period, the Class A will be considered complete. So with that, that concludes the formal presentation portion for tonight. In a minute, I will be turning it over to Brian and our team to respond to any questions that we've received during the presentation. But before I do that, I would like to again thank you all for your attendance. Again, we look forward to hearing from you. You can certainly submit any questions in writing to the team members with the contact information that's on the screen now. This information was also included in the notice that you hopefully received or that you saw online. I think that's it for me, so I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Tammy. At this point, we have received one question, which I will read out and I will attempt to answer here. So the question is, what is the current speed requirement for the bridge as is? Now, I wasn't 100% certain or clear on whether that's asking what is the posted speed limit, which I don't think it is, or what is the speed limit we recommend traveling across the bridge currently. So I'll attempt to answer both. So the current posted speed limit on the 5th line over the bridge is 60 kilometers per hour. However, it is signed with a recommended speed reduction of 30 kilometers an hour when crossing over the bridge. The reason for that recommended speed reduction is due to the design issues or deficiencies currently with respect to sight lines over the bridge and the sight stopping distance, as well as potentially rider comfort, and also the potential for meeting another vehicle from the opposing direction due to the single lane configuration currently. So the 30 kilometers an hour is our recommended speed for when traveling over it. It's posted with the yellow sign indicating that. That being said, it should be noted that it's still borderline even at that speed. So we do recommend caution when traversing the existing bridge structure. For information, the future or the proposed bridge will be designed for 80 kilometers per hour, which is the posted speed limit plus 20 kilometers per hour, which is the current industry standard when crossing the bridge. It was noted here too that it used to be 80 kilometers an hour at one time, the road posted previously, but I'm not sure at what point in the past that actually was reduced to 60 kilometers per hour, but it is currently posted as 60 kilometers per hour with a recommendation of 30 kilometers an hour over the bridge. I believe the intention is for it to remain posted 60 kilometers per hour, but we do design for 20 kilometers per hour above the speed limit for the proposed replacement structure. And that is all we actually have for questions at this point, unless anybody else has any that they want to. I think the intention is to wait for a few minutes, Tammy, to see if we get any more. Is that correct?
Thanks, Brian. Yes, so if that's all of the questions that we've received so far, The intention will be that the team will remain online until 7 p.m. So certainly if you have any additional questions that you'd like to submit, you can do so, and we will respond accordingly as they come up on our screen.
Another question. Okay, it looks like we do have another question at this point. The question is, will there be any utilities implemented in the construction that connect north and south of the proposed bridge? Not 100% certain what that question's asking, if you're asking about new utilities being installed or whether the existing utilities will be impacted. With respect to impacted, yes, there will be some impacts to the existing utilities, in particular the Bell and Hydro, which are aerial in the area, and I think there is some underground also. We do anticipate impacts to those utilities, but as Tammy mentioned previously, that will come out during the design process once the preferred design option is finalized. With regards to installing or adding any additional utilities, at this point, I don't know if there's any plans either from the township or the existing utility companies to add any new utilities in the area. We have another question that came up here asking how much land on either side of the bridge will be required. That's a difficult one to answer because it is dependent upon ultimately which option is selected. As Tammy mentioned, the horizontal alignment is essentially fixed, but the vertical alignment is one of the things that's being looked at with respect to the preferred solution. And at this point here, although we've selected the option we have selected, will have some property impacts and some land requirements, acquisition requirements. I think, as I believe, both on the south side of the bridge on both sides of the road and on the north side of the bridge on the east side of the road, I do believe the township has enough property on the west side. I can't say the exact amount at this point here because that would have to be worked out in probably through the preliminary design that is completed to be confirmed, as well as the fact that it should be noted that the existing road is not entirely contained within the existing road allowance. So there is already property infringement currently existing, which will need to be likewise addressed as part of the reconstruction works.
There's another question, Brian. It says,
so.
Yeah, okay, I'll let you read it.
Yeah, so the next question was, will the crossing be shut down during construction and a detour implemented? Yes, any of these options, even if we were going with the rehabilitation option, will require road closure to complete. And that's largely driven by, to some degree, the limited width of the existing structure. It's only a single lane right now, so there is no ability to maintain traffic over the existing bridge structure while constructing the new structure. It's also because the existing or the proposed bridge, the footprint of it will overlap the existing bridge, so the existing bridge will have to be removed almost in its entirety before the new bridge can be constructed. As mentioned during the initial stages, there was an option looked at in terms of shifting the alignment of the bridge further to the west, which may have allowed potentially for the existing bridge to remain open for a period during construction, but it had much larger property impacts and greater costs associated with it. As well as the fact that in reality, once the road construction begins on the approaches, you would not be able to traverse the bridge anyways at that point. So we will be looking at, regardless of the final or option selected here, we will be looking at a complete road closure during construction with a detour implemented for the duration of construction. Next question, is a concrete girder bridge the only type of bridge being considered at this point? Not necessarily. The configurations shown depicted were based on pre-stressed concrete girders. That doesn't mean that it would have to stay with that. During the preliminary design, options would be looked at with regards to potentially using steel girders. Typically, we have found, though, that for this type of configuration, concrete girders are just as economical as the steel girders. And also too, given the potential for concrete girders to be locally sourced, that is also a potential desirable impact to the local economy to utilize potentially locally produced girders. But the type of girder is not finalized at this point, and it will be reviewed and considered during the design stage. Next question: will the homeowner affected be notified of the new land alignments? Yes, any property impacts will be brought to the property owner's attentions as soon as possible during the preliminary design, and once the actual impacts are finalized. Once the alignment is finalized and the property impacts are determined, there will be a property acquisition will be initialized. At that point, the property owners will definitely be advised, but I imagine there will be some consultation with the potentially impacted property owners leading up to it also. There will be efforts made to minimize property impacts as much as possible, while also taking into account, though, the economics of doing so. But that was one of the goals, even with the alignments we looked at, was to minimize property impacts as much as possible. I should also mention, when Tammy was talking about the various vertical alignments, not only was it driven by costs and some of the other factors, but that was one of the big factors, was property impacts. The higher the road is raised, in particular on the bridge approaches, the larger the embankment becomes. The larger the embankment becomes, or higher it becomes, the wider it becomes at the base, which means that it extends further and further, requiring a wider road allowance to construct it. Therefore, we were looking, that largely drove our decision to go with the lowest alignment. Question: what is the estimated time of completion for option 1C? As Tammy mentioned, I don't think there is any estimated time of completion at this time. Following the completion of the EA, it goes back into the township's hands, and as Tammy mentioned, they will have to look at budget requirements and various other items there in terms of when to proceed with it or whether to proceed with this, and that timing is unknown at this time. With regards to actual construction duration, for a bridge of this magnitude, it's anticipated that it will probably be constructed over 2 seasons, most likely. It's not necessarily 2 full years of construction, but it is anticipated that it will begin in 1 year and finish in the subsequent year, with probably winter construction required. We don't believe that, due to the magnitude of construction proposed here, that it can be completed in a single season.
I don't see any further questions, Brian. So again, I think we just wait on the line to see if any additional questions are posted.
Sure.
Oh, I just realized I was on mute there. Sorry about that. So I did just say that it looks like we still do have about 15 attendees on the line, and it's completely at your discretion if you wish to remain on the line to see if there are any subsequent questions that come up, or if you decide to leave, that's totally up to you. We will remain on the line until 7 to answer any questions, and those questions will be included in the final recording that will be posted on the township's website. So once again, we would just like to thank you for your participation. We look forward to receiving any comments and input you might have, and we wish you a good evening. Thank you. Well, that brings us to 7 o'clock and the end of this presentation. I would once again like to thank you all for attending. We look forward to receiving any further comments or questions you have, which can be submitted in writing to the members of the project team. Wish you a good evening. Thank you again.